We have breaking news, MS Now, with exclusive reporting that a federal grand jury in Maryland is now investigating two Trump administration officials, Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte and DOJ pardon attorney Ed Martin. Now, the investigation centers on whether they appointed unauthorized people to help with mortgage fraud investigations of California Democratic Senator Adam Schiff and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Joining us with their exclusive reporting, MS Now's Ken Delanian and Carol Lenig. Carol, let's start with laying out exactly what you've learned about this investigation.
So, Chris, a federal grand jury in Greenbelt, Maryland, has begun subpoenaing records and documents, and FBI agents have begun interviewing individuals about the way in which Bill Pulte, the Federal Housing Finance Chair, and Ed Martin, a DOJ official who used to be the U.S. Attorney in Maryland before he was removed from that office, whether they have improperly designated or deputized individuals to participate in investigating alleged mortgage fraud. Now, Chris, you know that these mortgage fraud claims have been seriously criticized and questioned by career prosecutors who do not find that the evidence of mortgage fraud by either Letitia James or Adam Schiff, Senator Adam Schiff, have any real factual sufficiency to bring charges. Nevertheless, Bill Pulte has made these referrals, and both Mr. Pulte and Mr. Martin have been pressuring prosecutors' offices to bring these cases. Now, the shoe is on the other foot, according to our sources and documents that we have reviewed at MS Now just this morning that indicate this has turned around in a way that the Department of Justice is investigating the methods used by these two top Trump allies.
So what are the possible implications here, Ken?
Chris, this is the most surprising story I have covered in the Trump administration. It is absolutely extraordinary. One legal scholar reacting to our reporting called it a sign of life for the rule of law. Ed Martin is not just the pardon attorney. He's leading the weaponization working group. He's Donald Trump's darling. He's the instrument of revenge that Trump has put into the Justice Department to lead all these investigations against his political opponents. And here you have the Justice Department investigating him over what appears to be sort of a technical issue about whether they properly deputize people to conduct and carry out these cases. Obviously, there's something going on here. There's layers of MAGA infighting that we can't begin to fathom, and we're going to do some more reporting on it. But on its face, it's just an extraordinary story. One wonders how Donald Trump will react to this news that his own Justice Department is investigating some of his key allies who
Ken Delanian, what happened yesterday and perhaps what we're seeing today, because I want to follow up on what Carol is saying. Certainly in the case of Lindsay Halligan, a lot of people put warning signals out about her lack of experience and the concerns that they had about someone with her background being able to go into a grand jury and do what is required. So is there some sort of through line, do you think, potentially between these cases?
I think that's a sound theory, and it's more than a theory. It's based on what we're hearing from some people. Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche were never thrilled with these marginal mortgage fraud cases, and they know that career prosecutors said over and over again that they weren't worth bringing. And look, Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of Florida. Todd Blanche is a former Justice Department prosecutor. Whatever else you think of them, they're real lawyers, and they're running the Justice Department, and they know that things will happen in courtrooms that will blow up in their face, as we saw yesterday, and they don't want that to happen. So this could be an attempt for them to sort of get their house in order. But wow, if it is, it's sort of the nuclear option here, a criminal investigation of some of Donald Trump's most favored allies who are doing his bidding. They're playing with fire. It'll be really interesting to see how this plays out now.
Like some accusers have said, are there legal complications involved in using it in a criminal trial? Is there a reason to just say, well, it can't be shown? I mean, talk to us about that in terms of using it to get to the people who perpetrated this against these young women.
Well, any video showing any type of enablement of this horrific sexual ring of minors and showing that these individuals were involved or showing prior acts to show that people were aware could absolutely be evidence of the ongoing crime. But whether or not it would be admissible evidence in a particular criminal trial really is dependent not only on the jurisdiction and whether or not that evidence would be seen as propensity evidence or just because it has happened in the past means that it is underlying evidence of what happened in the underlying criminal case. But it could also be interesting evidence of prior acts. So it could show some type of guilt, but it could also show absence of mistake. It could show liability in various ways. It could show absence of surprise. In other words, that people knew that this was going on. If it's an underlying criminal trial, that particular criminal defendant knew what was going on. And I think one of the other things to be mindful of is by showing this evidence, sometimes it will be shown to the jury in its entirety, but whether or not it will be shown publicly, whether or not there's a camera in the courtroom or not, would be the really the challenging question. Because if there's nudity, particularly of a minor, that's not something that would necessarily be broadcast, and I would imagine that a protective order would be in place.
I think it leads to a larger question, Lauren, as someone who has prosecuted cases like this. For the average person who feels outraged, and there are lots of Americans who are outraged, who really weren't aware of the extent of this perhaps before, who are saying, well, if they have videos, if they have these consistent stories, why is it so complicated to get prosecutions against these folks, whether they are direct perpetrators or, as you say, people who are involved in a larger conspiracy? Can you help folks understand what you've been up against?
Yeah, I mean, just historically, while there may be lots of other evidence, very often you have to ground your case in victim testimony. And so often what we find is that predators, traffickers, other exploiters, they often terrorize their victims into silence. That's a real strategy that's used. And for so many years, so many of these Epstein victims were completely silenced. They were harassed in so many different ways. They were terrified for lots of good reasons, which I think will come out. And they were silenced. And they're at a moment where there's no silencing them anymore. Yeah. They are unified and they are ready for the truth to come out.
Kristen, Pam Bondi yesterday said the information has prompted an investigation into Epstein's ties with Democratic politicians. What can survivors and their attorneys do if that causes delays and after 30 days we still haven't seen the bulk of the information?
They can seek congressional oversight, really, to make sure that, in fact, the documents that are being withheld are in fact tied to a current investigation and not some ploy to try to withhold documentation under the exception of the bill, which says that the DOJ can withhold documents if it is related to a current investigation so that they don't taint the investigation. In other words, that exception is appropriate, but we need congressional oversight to make sure that it's not being abused. And I think that would be the avenue.
Lauren, I have to ask you before we go, what's your level of hope?
I'm hopeful. I'm actually really hopeful. You know, we listened to Annie Farmer talk the other day about how everybody has said that every step of the way, it's impossible. It's never going to happen. And then Andrew is...
This was happening. We knew this was happening. 100%, right? We knew that people were going to start getting hit by grand juries, by subpoenas, by investigations, and probably eventually formal charges and convictions. Because one thing was always very clear, going back to Trump's first term, however immune Trump was while president, and the Supreme Court sort of has confirmed that the presidents are much more immune from charges than they used to be, which is bad. I want to make that clear. That's a bad decision. But Trump, when he was president, was like, presidents are largely immune from most of the things they do, even if criminal and evil as president, right? Like war crimes and whatnot. American presidents get away with that all the time. But their staff aren't necessarily immune. And we saw lots of people go to jail for Trump or face severe criminal penalties for Trump, get disbarred, heavy fines, lives and reputations ruined for him just in the first term, and often before January 6th. A lot of that was happened because of January 6th, but even before January 6th, lots of people, from the thugs on the ground who broke in to his lawyers like Michael Cohen and whatnot, people went to prison for Trump. And what we said all along, and other creators on YouTube have said this too, is however immune Trump is, and I don't think he's actually fully immune, to be clear, there are still limits, but however immune Trump is, his cronies aren't. His cronies are not immune. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and I'm not suggesting they're the ones under the grand jury, but I'm just saying, like, I'm naming top people. Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, Pete Hegseth, RFK Jr., Tulsi, none of these people are immune like Donald Trump is. And so they can go to prison for a long, long, long time while Trump gets away with everything. But the bad news for Trump here is that these people may well get an incentive to dish the dirt on him, to abandon him and tear down his regime, his term, his legacy. Because if they can go to prison, but Trump can't, they can still hurt him politically by flipping on him and yet more Trump allies. This is the first domino to fall.